freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Travelers Championship. Joining me to break it all down, it's Sia Nejad. And Sia, we are right back at it again with another big-time event. This one, though, about 3,000 miles away from the one we had last week.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like all gas, no brakes. You think there's going to be some sort of break after a major. And not only is there not a break, but we're going across the country to Cromwell, Connecticut. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of, we'll get to strokes gained narrative at the end, but I think there's some potential narratives out there that might be just, fruitless with respect to some of the big time guys that were in contention yesterday at the US Open. How live are they going to be in this tournament, especially if they get through to the weekend? It's an interesting question. I mean, I don't really know that I lend any credence to that, but it's an interesting question knowing that this big designated event is right after the US Open.
Before we jump into this, the link for the fan vote for the one and done is live in the description. You can click it there, get your vote in. We'll go on Tuesday for the Mega Preview Pod, and we will count those votes up and get you a selection for this week. See, I assume that conversation is going to be in regards to that 3,000-mile trip from one place to another. If that's the case, I mean, listen, it was pretty much perfect in LA all week long. I remember being much more tired after leaving Rochester because that's a harder place to get in and out of. And also we had that Saturday where it nonstop poured and it was a slog and you were wet and it was nasty. Like I don't particularly have fatigue concerns about these guys.
Well, I'm not sure it's that. And for the record, I'm not sure I'm even buying into any of these narratives, but I wonder with the guys that were in contention down the stretch, whether they're superstars like Scottie Scheffler or guys like Wyndham Clark and Ricky Fowler, for example, are they going to sort of like, whether they realize it or not, kind of take a step back because it was such an intense, several moments over the last 18 holes for those guys on Sunday and Saturday for that matter. I wonder if that's something that people will be factoring in that we may be able to take advantage of from an ownership standpoint. I mean, I think Ricky Fowler and Wyndham Clark are really interesting case studies. I mean, there's other factors that go in there too, especially with Wyndham being the winner at the US Open, but how much ownership are they going to get? I think it's a really interesting question.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the golf course before we talk about the players. And Troy, if you could share my screen, that'd be splendid. So what we've got here is TPC River Highlands, a golf course that we are very, very familiar with. And I suppose, I don't want to call it the defining feature, but the thing that jumps out at you immediately is how short it is. 6,800 yards is a par 70. So historically, we have seen golfers like Ches Reavie play really well and Brian Harman play really well, guys that aren't necessarily known as bombers. It's a golf course that is more nuanced than anything here, Sia. So I think it opens up a lot of different possible outcomes for the guys that are going to be on the first page of the leaderboard.
A lot of possible different outcomes is a perfect way to put it. And I think when you're constructing your DFS lineups, you want to consider that. I don't think you want to go super conventional with your builds this week. That's just my first glance after building a couple of lineups. I just think taking chances this week, especially knowing that some of the guys Brian Harman is an interesting one because I think he'll be really popular. Ches Reavie's in that 6K range. So I don't think he's going to be super popular, but those types of guys that are the shorter hitters, people are going to want to play perhaps. And I just think it's an interesting thing to consider when all of those types of golfers are in play. You can really do some different things with your roster construction. So we'll get into it when we get to the pricing. But I will say this, I'm definitely looking at some of those golfers that we mentioned in terms of the type of game I'm looking for. Off the tee is great, and I want to look at that. But I mean, I definitely am leaning towards accuracy. I think that's what the industry will be doing. So, we have to consider, Rick, whether to sort of pivot off the narratives if that ends up being the prevailing narrative. But approach play is going to be really important to me. I usually bake around the green game into weighted tee to green. So that's something I'll be looking at. But outside of that, those are the three main things that I'm looking at from a metric standpoint. And then, of course, the wedge play, which is going to come into play here on this short course.
Yeah, it's a Pete Dye design, and it's really held up as of late to these guys who are not really able to just bomb it around. What I think is so cool about it is you can kind of play it however you want. If you want to go out there and hit driver every single hole, that's available to you. If you want to kind of be more precise about it and lay back to a different number, that is available to you. There is water in play on a handful of holes that'll gobble up your golf ball. And while the greens aren't necessarily difficult to hit, if you miss them, you'll kind of be in a spot of bother. So with all that being said, I think that also aligns with what the regression model here at rickrungood.com has, where there's not really anything that stands out. A lot of these stats are just kind of middle of the road, well-rounded stats. Driving accuracy does technically correlate more to success here than other courses, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to get it done. Approach play, around the green, putting are all, and off the tee are basically all in the low 20s, which means they're right about that middle of the pack mark. So yeah, this is a very unique stat profile that we don't normally see. And it's exciting because I think there's like 120 guys who are alive.
Exactly. And I think when it comes to sort of the all-around game, I think that's why I like to look at some of the tee to green stuff, the more the global stats, weighted tee to green in the case of what I look at rickrungood.com. What's interesting here, though, when we look at the stat profile and we see putting from 7 feet, rank 8, I just like the first thing I think of, and we're going to get to him in a second, I'm like, okay, Scotty's out. Even though he putted just fine. Listen, I understand the metrics look fine, but every time he faced a putt that seemed to be within, on Sunday, I'm talking about 7 to 15 feet, like it had no chance whatsoever. Am I wrong there, Rick?
It was pretty ugly. Yeah. I saw a lot of Scotty this week, and I practice rounds, tournament rounds, it didn't matter. He really did not sniff making many putts, which I will continue to argue isn't the worst thing in the world, but it is jarring when you see a guy hit, I don't know, 35 first putts over the course of a week, and just none of them ever sniffed the cup.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't close, like no burned edges whatsoever on Sunday. It was just like not close. And to your credit, Rick, I'm pretty sure when you were out there on Wednesday or Tuesday, it was probably Tuesday, actually, you tweeted something out about, listen, he finished great. I mean, it's not like he had a bad tournament. This is the Scotty Scheffler experience, but you tweeted something out, I think, to the effect of, everything's looking great for Scotty Scheffler, but the putter, it's the same old story with him.
Yeah, it was just more of the same, right? I mean, he was with Xander and I think Sam Burns, and those guys are flushers, and he was running circles around them from tee to green. I mean, every shot was better, in full control of his game. And then they'd get on the putting surfaces, and you'd see, Sam Burns eventually roll one in. You'd see Xander roll them in, and you'd see Scotty be 7 feet away and not have it get within like 12 inches of the cup at any point. It's jarring, but it's on brand, which I think is kind of interesting, right? When we can talk about him on the other side, but like, he's been the most on brand consistent golfer, right? Like It hasn't been, it's not like some weeks he's driving it well, some weeks he gets hot with the putt. It's like, no. This is the same exact thing every single week. He's actually been quite easy to predict because he never does anything different.
Yeah, it's true. And you wonder if, is the tee to green stuff going to start to fall off? Because to me, it has to, unless this guy is the second coming of Tiger Woods. I just wonder when the time period is where the putter maybe improves just a little bit, but he's just not flushing it like we've seen him flush it this entire calendar year. Like, Rick, there will be a time where he's not flushing it like this, right? I thought, like, and that's why we'll get into the discussion. I want to be able to predict that and be on the right end of that when I'm picking guys like Jon Rahm or Patrick Cantlay or Xander Schauffele. I'm not sure when that time is coming, though, because he keeps doing it.
Yeah, maybe he will just continue to flush it in perpetuity. I don't know. We'll find out for sure. We've got a lot of big names and actually a pretty sizable 10K range that we are going to start with. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
Get breaking news.
Big news coming out of the NFL today.
Highlights and instant reaction.
The largest final round comeback in Ford Championship history. We're down to the final four.
I just want to take time to analyze greatness.
Talk winners and losers with a guy who's already a big winner.
CBS Sports HQ. It's all sports all day long.
And we're back. Here's the cheat sheet. 5 golfers over $10,000 in their names that you certainly know. Scotty Scheffler, 11-3. Rory McIlroy, 10,900. John Rahm, 10-8. And we round it out with a pair of buddies. Xander Schauffele at $10,400 and Patrick Cantlay, 10,200. All of those guys, Sia, finished within the top 14 of the U.S. Open. Most of them have played this event a couple of times and have decent results. So we're going to have to find a way to start deciding between the big 5 at the top.
So this is one of those, like, I almost feel like we need to treat this part of the, like when we're talking 10K range and above, like a ranking system, because it's really hard to really make an argument against one of these guys. I mean, if I'm, Rory, I'm not super interested in playing. Xander Schauffele, I'm not super interested in playing. Of course, we need to see ownership and all those things. I think the 3 guys that really come to mind for me are Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, and of course, Scotty Scheffler. If I had to pick 2 of those, I think I'm just waiting to be right on the John Rahm versus the Scotty Scheffler thing. I think this might be the track where maybe I am. I think Rahm is sort of in a pretty good place. He gained across the board at the U.S. Open. I just think it's a matter of time before he gets another splash win. And then as far as Patrick Cantlay, obviously he has pretty good experience here. I mean, for Patrick Cantlay, I don't know that it's elite experience, but just constantly top 15ing this tournament feels like a pretty good look. The weighted tee to green looks great. The approach play has been a little spotty, particularly at the U.S. Open and the Wells Fargo, but I also think he's kind of due for a win too. So I think those are my 2 favorite, knowing that all 5 are great.
5 straight top 15s at this event for Patrick Cantlay, yet none of them are inside the top 10. So all of them between 11th and 15th place. Obviously a very good record, but not like super, super elite course history stuff, but very, very good. I do want to point one thing out. I think I've got it handy here for Mr. Xander Schauffele, because I'm wondering, Sia, what everyone is going to do with this guy. He had a very, I always kind of wonder what's going to happen after a very public bad round, right? He is in the final group with Rory on Saturday. He immediately leaves it in the fairway bunker on 1 twice. And after shooting an opening 62 and backing it up with a great round on Friday, he fades there on Saturday. And I feel like that week will be seen very much as a disappointment. And I wonder if people will go back to him after how popular he was.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think what you're probably driving at is that he won't be popular. Is that kind of your guess, that he'll get kind of like phased out of this range a little bit from an ownership standpoint?
Well, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
It's always tough to say because he's usually pretty popular. He's the defending champion, but I think that, you have Cantlay, who's $200 cheaper with the elite histories, and they basically had, if you just look at the box scores, right? Cantlay and Xander had basically the same finish last week. It's a 10th and a 14th. Like no one's choosing sides between that. So you have Cantlay, who's $200 cheaper, or you go up and you just pay up for Scotty or Rahm or Rory. I don't know. It's just kind of when a guy has a really prime time bad round, which he pretty much bounced back for, at least with the driver, which was the problem on Saturday. He drove it well on Sunday. I guess I'm just trying to wish it into existence that everybody forgets about Xander.
Well, I think that's going to be the case. By the way, I think it's really strange that Xander is ahead of Patrick Cantlay, for whatever that's worth. And I think that lends itself to the idea of, you're right, they're either going to pay up for one of the big 3, John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, or Scotty Scheffler, or they're going to go down to Patrick Cantlay, who feels like just a very comfortable option in the 10K range, or they'll go down to, and we'll get there, like guys like Victor Hovland, Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa, sort of in that conversation. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Xander's going to have really low ownership, actually. I think you're right about sort of the public falls, especially Saturday, Sunday. It didn't look, especially on TV, it didn't look like Xander was playing much better than he did on Saturday. So yeah, I think especially because of his price, if he was like 9,700, I think people would go right back to him. But because he's 10-4 and he's ahead of Cantlay and he's not that much less than the 3 guys I just mentioned, yeah, I think you're right, Rick. I don't think anybody's going there.
So here's Rory's stat profile. And again, a very public, whatever you want to call it, from Rory last week. But if I erased the two in the finishing position and you did not watch the tournament and you looked at a guy that gained 13 and a half strokes ball striking, who gained a stroke around the green, a stroke and a half with the putter, you'd be foaming at the mouth. Now, enter said narratives, enter said discord of another disappointing US Open. Does Rory McIlroy flip the switch back on just a few days later, right? This is where I have a really difficult time disconnecting from, or even connecting to the narrative, or connecting to these guys being human.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me, because I think Rory, if you just look at these stats, I mean, granted, on approach he was a little spotty there for a couple tournaments before the US Open and after the PGA Championship, but this is really impressive. And honestly, the funny part about Rory is that he'll have what everybody seems to think is a bad tournament and he'll finish T7. He'll have another tournament that seems to be really bad and he'll finish T7. And in the US Open case, I mean, I don't think anybody thought he had a bad tournament, but I think they're going to be underwhelmed with how he finished. I think that everybody sort of expected him to close, especially when Ricky Fowler started to fade, and he didn't. I think he's a really interesting option. I mean, all of these, that's why you almost have to rank these guys. All of these guys are set up to win very soon. I don't know that I'd say that about Xander, to be honest with you. And I'm not like Cantlay, I'm starting to feel it for him, but it's really those top three. I think any one of those three are just due to win any given tournament. And I think I'm comfortable including Rory in that conversation, because I've seen enough from him, even when he's quote unquote not playing very well, top fiving or top 10ing. I think those three have tremendous win equity.
Okay, so let's just rank them here. So let's take all factors into consideration. Price, it's early, but what we think that projected ownership could look like, everything into consideration. How are you ranking these five?
So I'm going to go with Jon Rahm.
Okay.
Patrick Cantlay.
Mm-hmm.
It's so close with the next two, but I'm going to go Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele.
Wow. Okay. That's how tight this is, because I'm going to go almost in the polar opposite. I mean, Xander being $900 cheaper than Scotty and having one bad driving round that he bounced back from, and you're defending, that's kind of bonkers to me. So I'd go Xander 1. I would probably go Scotty 2, Rory 3, Cantlay 4, Rahm 5.
And that's totally fair. I mean, here's the reality. These guys, yeah, I mean, these guys are so good. I mean, listen, you're going to win and lose the tournament potentially on being right or wrong here. But the truth is, the margins are so narrow among these five that you truly, from a DFS standpoint, you're truly winning and losing, in the lower ranges, in my opinion, getting off, some of the 7K chalk and having the right pivot or having the right roster construction, maybe starting in the 9K range or whatever, avoiding some of those common spots where people are going to gravitate to. So this is one of those things where it's man, I can't say with a ton of conviction, I really like Patrick Cantlay more than Xander Schauffele, because I think it would be ridiculous for me to say that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, the 9K range also has a ton of great names in it. Starts with Victor Hovland at $9,900, Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa, Tommy Fleetwood, our newest major champion in Wyndham Clark, Ricky Fowler also in this range, and then we rounded out with Max Homa. So here we go. This is a fascinating range here, Sia. You've got guys that won last week, had close calls, played well on Sunday. Everything's here. So let's sort it out.
There's two guys that I like, and we usually group them together. It's Victor Hovland and Morikawa. I say group them together because they kind of splashed on the scene at the same time, of course. Hovland, I think, is starting. I think maybe later in this season, maybe a few. We still need a few tournaments. I think he's going to get another win, and I think we're going to start talking about him in the 10K range as opposed to the 9K range. The approach has been kind of an issue for him just a little bit lately. But overall, the game's been great. We know he closed at the Memorial. For the record, in 2020, he was T11 here, but he actually led the field tee to green. He happened to lose 3.3 strokes putting, so that's why he was T11. But I just love how he ball strikes it. He'll get it out there. He'll be accurate. The approach game is going to be dialed in, and we know he can get hot with the putter. So it's him and Morikawa for me. As far as Morikawa, I just think we're maybe in a bounce back phase with Morikawa. It seems like the back injury is a non-issue. The finishing position starting to shine. Don't forget that WD he had at the Memorial. He was going to finish real high at that tournament, unless he had a disaster Sunday. So really liking Hovland and Morikawa this week.
Morikawa is hopeful. Like I didn't watch obviously much of the coverage. I don't know how much he was being shown.
He wasn't being shown a lot, Rick, for some reason.
Okay, so I thought it was pretty quiet. I didn't read a lot about him on Twitter or anything like that. He's doing it again. He's gaining the 1 to 1.25 strokes on approach, now going on like at least 5 straight tournaments, which is exactly what you want from him. This is a golf course that rewards accuracy over distance. Check for Collin Morikawa. And this is a place where, or excuse me, this is not a place, but the putter is still a problem, but he's gained in 3 of his last 4. The last 2 have been basically multiple strokes with the putter. This is like the perfect spot for him, I think. And I don't think people realize that he is literally back to being, because there's always this, he is such a bad narrator of his own game. He is so bad at it that people just take what he's saying as truth. And he's like, I stink. I can't even hit the center of the club face. I don't have anything. And he's the best ball striker in the world. Like, do not listen to a word he says. And this is the spot for him. Yeah,
I totally agree with you. I think Collin could really shine here. And again, I think him and Hovland, just from a flushing it standpoint, I think their games are really going to shine here. And for the record, because they're in the 9K range and that they should be competitive with those guys in the 10K range, I think you can start your roster here, frankly. And for the record, I did something just from a lineup construction standpoint. I want it. You know, you don't necessarily like the guy I'm going to feature here, so I'll change it. But let me ask you this, Rick. What would you rather do here? And we'll get to Hideki in a second, who for some reason is at a weird price. But Hovland, Morikawa, and Hideki, if you start your lineup there, so you're starting in the 9K range, you're getting 2 great 9K guys, and you're getting the value of Hideki, who's going to be super popular, by the way. That's going to leave you with $7,300. You prefer that, or let's say Scheffler and Morikawa, which is going to leave you around the same exact number?
Nope. I'll take the 3.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The Matsuyama stuff is sick. We'll talk about it in a second.
Yeah.
Wyndham Clark 92, Ricky Fowler 91. For me, hat tip to both of these guys. I will catch you down the road. You will not see me buying high on either of these 2.
So this is an ownership thing for me. I totally understand where you're coming from there. And this is kind of what I was trying to say inartfully at the beginning of the show when it comes to narratives and people who were contending last week and winning last week in Wyndham Clark's case. I wonder what the ownership is going to be. I think both of them are going to be a little bit lower than people expect. And maybe that means it's time to jump on them. You know, the Wyndham Clark thing, he seems like the personality type to win and then like really be geared up to go after a win the very next week. He almost gives off that sort of I am the captain now vibe, where it's like, oh, you thought that was good? Check this thing out. It just goes back to that club twirl on whatever it was Saturday. Like, this guy's just dialed in when he's on the golf course. It wouldn't shock me if he's contending here at the Travelers.
The skill set's awesome. We've been talking about this a lot. Yep. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, listen, he missed the cut of the PGA Championship after his win at the Wells Fargo. That could be a lot of things, right? That does not necessarily have to be because he won the Wells Fargo Championship. Who knows? Maybe he's now getting more comfortable with this, right? The guy's won twice in his last 4 starts. It's truly, you know, if the PGA Tour had, well, I don't know if I want to say this. I was going to say like an MV, like he is truly like the most valuable player, not like the best player, right? There are guys who are the best player, but the getting the most out of what his expectations were coming into the year, he is leaps and bounds above everybody on this circuit. So I don't know what, maybe it's the most improved player. Maybe it's just like, I don't know what it is, but if there was something like that, Wyndham Clark would be running away with it.
Yeah, and he's sustaining it. Like we see this a lot with players who we noticed it at the beginning of the calendar year, if not in the fall swing. I think it was in the beginning of the calendar year where we started to talk about him a lot on this show. And he's been sustaining it. Like you would think a name like Wyndham Clark, he'd put it together for a couple of months and then he'd just start to kind of ebb and flow and be a bad golfer and then maybe pop as a good golfer. Like I kind of think Wyndham Clark is here to stay. And for the record, that, I don't know if you weren't listening to the broadcast. So, but I think you might be aware of this. He has like this maybe new sports psychologist that he's been consulting with this year, maybe in years past. And that's sort of where, what is that, Rick?
This is the book that he credits. Wyndham Clark credits a lot of his mental stuff.
Get out of here.
This book, it's called The Energy Bus. So yes, I've read this. I picked it up after his last win at the Wells Fargo because I was like, if this dude's just like a mental coach and a book away, imagine what this is going to do for everybody. So not a paid ad, but yeah, I mean, dude, yeah, it's obviously something has changed for him.
That's really cool that you have that book, by the way. This was not set up at all, obviously. If you're watching us on YouTube, I was like in shock.
I had it within arm's reach. I was looking around. I'm like, I know it's either over there where I'm not going to be able to get up and get it, or it's like right underneath that hat, and I was able to reach it.
And it somehow matches my shirt. Listen, I think guys that or girls, whoever, who kind of can tap into that psychology or have somebody tap into that psychology for them, I think that's a huge edge when it comes to an individual sport like golf. And it goes back to whether you want to play him this weekend. I mean, I just don't think, or I should say this week, I just don't think he's the personality type that is going to be like, all right, I'm kind of good. I feel pretty good about what I've done this season or what I did last week. I think he's just going to dial right back in.
Maybe the X factor for me here is Tommy Fleetwood. He shoots another 62 on Sunday. Had a run at the Canadian Open. He's playing great golf. Is this just Tommy going to be uber popular and going back to a place where he's had like mediocre success?
Yeah, I don't know about uber popular because I do think it's a good question. He's kind of expensive now, and I just wonder how many people are going to play Fleetwood when he's right next to Colin Morikawa, who I think is going to pick up a little bit of steam. But to the point you're making, there's not a lot of guys below Fleetwood that people are going to want to play. So yeah, he'll probably pick up some popularity. I like him this week. I'm not a super big fan of him. I'd rather take some chances with guys like Colin and Hovland in the 9K range because I think it sounds ridiculous because of how Fleetwood has been playing, but I think their upside is a little bit better than Fleetwood in terms of closing a tournament. But yeah, I don't mind Fleetwood at all. I don't think I'm going to end up playing him, particularly if he's going to be popular.
Fair enough. We will continue this conversation in the 8K range, find some value, and have a little bit of fun at the end of the show. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
Someone hunted a hunter. This is the work of a serial killer. Pickett thinks he can do a cop's job.
Drop your weapon! Stand down!
No one trusts a lone man in the wild.
Joe Pickett Season 2 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. Use promo code Pickett for 1 month free trial. Credit card required. Terms apply.
And we're back. The $8,000 range, Sia, has a lot more questions than it does answers. It starts with a pair of slumping ? Golfers, Max Homa, Justin Thomas, and throw in Sungjae Im into the mix as well. Hideki Matsuyama is 8,600 with Cam Young in the middle at 85. And then the bottom of the $8,000 range is Jason Day, Sahith Theegala, Shane Lowry, Tom Kim, Si Woo Kim. So where do you want to start? The slumpers at the top or why Hideki is 8,600?
I think we should probably start at Hideki because, frankly, not only is he mispriced, but when you look at the golfers above him, they're mispriced too. Like guys like JT, for example. I mean, not to be disrespectful, but he should probably be, 8,300 at this point? He shouldn't be above Shane Lowry, in my opinion.
Well, I think he's just like hit the mark of where DraftKings is willing to put him, right? Like, because there is no real reason. So he was $8,700 at the US Open. Now, this is obviously not as good of a field as the US Open. It's a very, very good field. It's an elevated event. He was miserable at the US Open, second consecutive cut, and now he is more expensive. So I just think that we have kind of reached the bottom, and it's going to take something really, really crazy for JT to be lower than this. But you're right. I mean, it's just this Hideki at 86 thing, the whole $8,000 range doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of price.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, Justin Thomas is overpriced. Hideki is certainly underpriced. I think Lowry's a little underpriced too. Other than that, Cameron Young's interesting. Day's interesting. They're probably in about the right place, but the Hideki thing is going to make him super popular. So this is one of those things where I think we may end up having to say, okay, well, Hideki, if you're playing cash games, double ups, that kind of thing, maybe head-to-head matchups, maybe you throw him in there. But how can he not be popular, Rick?
Well, let's see. He is back to, I mean, it's very similar to Colin Morikawa, actually, where he's just back to being his elite ball striking self. He is phenomenal around the greens. The putter, as always, is all over the place. I mean, he is back to being on brand, right? And getting more consistent since those neck injuries. He's got a bunch of, the handful of top 25 finishes in his last couple of starts. The metrics are all there. I mean, I was just showing, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. I have this trends tool on rickrungood.com. It just kind of shows you golfers versus themselves. So golfers versus their own 100 round baseline. And if you look at this 8K range, Homa, way worse than his baseline right now. JT, way worse. Sung Jae, way worse. Cam Young, worse. Jason Day, worse. Tom Kim, way worse. The guy in this 8K range who is way better than his own baseline is Hideki, and he's doing it in the way you want it, which is like via T degree. Like this is the advanced metric darling play of the week, right? Like this just does not make any sense for him to be at this price. This is a stat profile that is keen on snapping off to the positive. Like he will be incredibly popular. It'll be well-deserved. He's making his debut, which, good, bad, or indifferent. Like he doesn't have course history. He doesn't have a crappy course history to knock us off of this.
So I guess that could go either way. I wonder when DraftKings does the pricing, if maybe they knocked him because he doesn't have course history. I don't know, but I will say this. For whatever reason, I went last 20 rounds when I took my initial look, as opposed to 24 or 36 or 50 or whatever the case may be. Last 20, and I didn't do this for Hideki. I just did it across the board just to kind of see where everybody was at. Last 20 rounds in this entire field, Hideki is third weighted tee to green and third weighted approach.
Yeah.
I mean, and we know he's going to be volatile with the putter. He's either going to gain with the putter or he's going to lose big with the putter. So, which is not a bad thing, obviously.
His three biggest tee to green gaining weeks in that stretch that you plugged in were the US Open, the PGA Championship, and the Masters. Like the three majors that we have played this year. So he is beating the world's best by a large margin.
Yeah. And again, now that he's shaken off this neck injury, presumably, I mean, that was probably what was holding him back during the tournaments. He wasn't playing super well. And I mean, now he's found health and he's found his game completely. I mean, I think I looked at his outright odds. I think they sunk. They probably started really long and they got shorter, but I think he's live outright.
Would you be investing, or I guess, how would you rank these three that there are just a lot of questions about, right? Max Homa off of a miscut, Justin Thomas off of a very ugly miscut, now 2 in a row. Sung Jae Im off a miscut, now 3 out of 4, which I think is only the second time in his career he's done that. Will you be investing? And if you had to pick one, where would you go?
So I might invest in a small way in one of them. I'll rank them the following way. Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Sung Jae Im. I think there's something going on with Sung Jae Im, like that we just don't know. Like one of those situations where maybe he's got an injury that he's not talking about or something, because it's not looking good.
We're going to find out in 6 weeks that he was like the Cam Davis thing, where he was like, oh yeah, I felt like crap and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me for 6 weeks. And it was the 6 weeks I missed like 6 straight cuts.
Yeah, well, and it was Harris English a year or so ago where he revealed he had an injury, like after missing a ton of cuts in a row. Who's, of course, he's going to be popular probably at the Travelers as well. But I think it's probably Max Homa, because at the very least, Max Homa has flashed some upside at the Wells Fargo top 10, at the Charles Schwab top 10. I think Max Homa, at least, the putter's been looking really good for him as well, is showing signs of life way more than JT and way more than Sung J M. I put JT second because he's not that far removed from having a bunch of good ball striking tournaments in a row. I haven't been playing him. I haven't been betting on him, but he had a stretch not too long ago where he seemed to be dialed in. So I don't think I'm going to be playing him, but I wouldn't begrudge anybody who plays him, especially if the ownership is super low.
Hideki, I like. Siwoo,
Yep, that's my other one in the 8K range.
I think is interesting. And I think, and I'm a sucker for this. I think I would try to be early one time on Tom Kim.
Are you early is the question.
I hope so.
I mean, last week, it felt like Tom Kim fever was back. I mean,
Was
he's looking really good, and he's on a great course fit here.
Was it back? I thought I was hoping it was just going to be chalked up as like one good 9.
I think the general perception is Tom Kim might be back. He might be in the form that we remember, not too long ago during the fall swing. And he gets to arrive to a course that's a way better course fit than anything he's seen lately. I think the fever might be back. I hope I'm wrong because I want to play him too, Rick.
Well, you described it, right? Like if you were trying to be early, now's the spot. I was hoping it was going to be seen as this guy missed his last 2 cuts and had one good 9 holes. So don't freak out over this. When really he gained like at least a stroke on approach each and every round. And I thought it was a lot better, but I'm now worried about Tom Kim mania.
We'll see. I mean, again, I hope I'm wrong. It'll probably end up being kind of middling where it's not going to be like too out of hand. Because I do think guys like Lowry, Siwoo Kim, Sahith, Henley, when we get to the 7K range, there's a lot of guys around him that are going to be popular as well. So I think that prevents him from getting like super chalky. But to your point, I like Tom Kim this week as well.
Yeah, let's get to those 7s. You mentioned it. Henley at $7,800, likely to catch a ton of steam. He's been great recently. He's been great at this golf course. You'd think it would set up for him. So that's kind of a given. Where maybe a little bit of Brian Harman, right? Brian Harman gets off to a hot start last week, which is kind of what everybody remembers is what happens on Thursday, even though he fades on the weekend, and he's got 4 top 8 finishes in the last 5. Those are probably your most popular plays, I would imagine.
I totally agree. Harman and Henley. Of the two, I'll be more inclined to play a chalky Henley than I will a chalky Harman. And that's just because I refuse to play a chalky Harman. With all of that said, I'm hoping Henley's ownership doesn't get too high. I mean, the history here is good for him as well, just like it is with Harman. Approach, tee to green, they all look great. He really paid off for me last week in DFS as well. I think I'm probably going to avoid Harman. A couple of other guys that I'm interested in. I wanted to like Keegan and Corey Connors, but there was enough I didn't like that I think I'm going to end up being off of them. I think I'm going to say the same thing about Denny McCarthy too, as we pull up Connors' profile. The putter hasn't been great. The ball striking's been okay for Corey Connors. Are you in or out on Corey Connors? Because I think I might be out.
I'd be more in on Connors than Keegan. And yeah. Denny's kind of weird. We'll talk about Denny in a second. But this, okay, yes. So he misses the cut at the U.S. Open by losing 4 strokes putting, which I don't really care about because it's Corey Connors and that's what he does. Misses the cut to Memorial. That one was pretty ugly. Now, the rest of it, the win in Texas, the T8 at the Wells Fargo, played well at the PGA Championship. He was in the Canadian Open for the first 2 days, and he finished T20. But you're right. I mean, this is like a pretty darn good spot for him, right? Just keep it in play, get your irons and wedges dialed in, and hope that you can make enough putts. The Denny conversation, I think, is fascinating because long-term, I'm like big in on Denny. Love what he's been doing. Love the improvements. Finding other aspects of his game that are not just relying on the putter. But my concern here is that this event is pretty darn sticky in terms of course history, like probably top 10 sticky on tour, where good or bad, guys tend to have the same results year over year. And Denny is like nowhere. I shouldn't say that. He has been nowhere close to solving this place. His best finish in 5 years is a T47, and 3 times he's failed to make the weekend.
Yeah, I think your analysis is spot on here. It would be different for me if he wasn't good here, but he was coming in with like really elite form. But he's really not. I mean, he's sort of reverting a little bit back to the Denny of old, where it's really just leaning a lot on the putter and the ball striking hasn't been there. Earlier this season, the ball striking was kind of there for him. It's just been very spotty. And so I think, and then again, on this particular course, I'm not going to be investing in Denny McCarthy. I think I don't think he's going to be popular this week, but I do think his name is really starting to trend. So he'll pick up at least a little bit of ownership, but I'm going to be out on him. I'll tell you a couple of guys that I'm in on. One is going to be a very obvious name, and one's going to be maybe a little off the radar. Austin Eckroat's the obvious one. I mean, like, pull up his profile. Like, this is just like kind of ridiculous. He's other than some short game issues here and there, this guy's crushing everything. I mean, what else can you say about Austin Eckroat other than the fact that he's young and there's probably going to be times for him to fall here and there, but everything looks great for him.
Last 24 rounds, he's gaining a stroke and a quarter, basically, ball striking. That's 15th in this field. It is right between Rory McIlroy and Hideki Matsuyama. It is better than Wyndham Clark. It is better than Russell Henley. That, final round at the U.S. Open where he flies up the leaderboard was kind of just more of the same, right? The runner-up finished to Byron Nelson. I mean, he has gained 7.5 strokes ball striking in 2 of his last 4 starts. I mean, it is, talk about guys who have found something. If this continues, he's going to be quite dangerous.
Yeah, totally agree. So, I mean, I think he's going to end up being popular. So it's just something to consider. Low 7K chalk is usually chalk you want to probably pivot off of, but just wait for the ownership there. I definitely think he's a good cash game play if you want to go that route. For those of you that actually play cash games in DFS, in PGA DFS, which I highly encourage, by the way, double up, heads up, whatever the case may be. My one that's off the radar a little bit, even though he won recently, is Emiliano Grillo at 7,300. The around the green game has been kind of an issue, but he's been spiking with the putter here and there. And the ball striking appears to be back. I do think this is a good course fit for him. So I think that's somebody I'd be willing to take a chance on at 7,300.
It's funny. I genuinely do not remember him winning. Like you said that, and I was like, where did he win? Because that was right before. God, why? I cannot even remember him winning the Charles Schwab Challenge.
Yeah, it happened. It's a thing that happened.
I guess it was because the week. It was the week between the PGA and the Memorial, and I was just like you said that, and I was like, what Corn Ferry event did he win? That's honestly what I was thinking. That is absolutely crazy. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else here in the 7K range. Eric Cole continues to play great, but unfortunately, I'm not. It's fine. I don't know how often I can go back to that.
Harris English is in this range. And I think he's going to be pretty popular. Obviously, he won here just a couple of years ago, and he's shown up lately. I think he's another one of the chalky guys, like Brian Harman, for example, Russell Henley. I think he's going to be, and I'm just kind of ballparking it, looking at this entire range. I think those 3 are going to be the most popular. And then I think Eckroat's going to pick up some ownership too. So I think those are the 4. I could be wrong. We could be wrong about Eckroat, but I just don't think people who are modeling are going to be able to ignore those stats. So I think those 4 are going to be the most popular in the 7K range.
Yeah, if you model anything regarding ball striking, he's going to pop up. Here's the 6K range. Bunch of names at the top. Hubbard, Michael Kim, SH Kim go down to the bottom. Mint Price, Russell Knox, Paul Haley, the second. How do we want to find value here at the bottom of the board?
I like a lot of the 6K range, for the record. I liked a lot of the 6K range last week too, and most of them made the cut. Carson Young was the only guy of the 5 guys I mentioned in the 6K range. He was the only guy that missed the cut, and he missed it by leaps and bounds. I actually do like him again at 6,500. I still think this is a disrespectful price on Carson Young. He's not the only guy I like, though. I mean, there's a handful as we pull up Carson Young stats here on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, he was just really bad last week, but prior to that, the guy's been completely dialed in on approach and with the putter.
I will tell you that I also, good or bad, do not even really care what guys do at major championships. Actually, yeah. I guess I do good, but we see so often guys like Carson Young, who are obviously great golfers who are finding their path on the PGA Tour, get smoked at majors, and I just could not even care any less. It's just there are so many ways to lose a ton of strokes at major championships, especially places we've never seen before, like LACC. I don't care that Justin Thomas shot an 82 last week. I care more that he hasn't been that good for 6 months than I do about him, shooting 8. I don't care about guys who struggle at majors.
What's interesting about that point is if you take Carson Young out of the U.S. Open, let's assume he doesn't qualify 3 weeks ago or whenever it was, 2 weeks ago. What's his price? Without that bad 2 rounds, his price is probably 7,000 flat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's been good enough to be 7,300 as far as I can tell, but he hasn't done it for super long. But again, look at these metrics here on YouTube on rickrungood.com. They're really impressive for a couple of stats that we really like. And by the way, off the tee, he hasn't been really that bad either. So I think Carson Young at 6,500 makes a lot of sense. Then we see our guy Dylan Wu at 6,600, perpetually at the 6,600, 6,400 range. Played him a lot last week, and that really paid off. Mark Hubbard at the top of this range at 6,900, probably going to be pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
Approach play has been incredible. Short game has been very good for Mark Hubbard too. JJ Spawn, I think, is interesting as maybe a pivot off of some of these 6K guys, or maybe like a Mark Hubbard, for example, if he becomes popular. Gained on approach in 7 in a row. Putter, not terrible either. And then there's other names too, Rick. And this is why I think you can get creative if you're doing a lot of lineups. I think you can dip down in the 6K range, maybe even more than once in a lineup. I think Chez Reavie is live. We know he's been good here. Guys in the super low 6K range like James Hahn. He's been making cuts. Ryan Moore, I mean, he's made a cut or two, and this appears to be a decent course bet. He's 6,200. Chad Ramey, maybe more of a showdown play, but he's 6,200. He's flashed. Austin Smotherman, again, maybe a showdown play at 6,500. I guess the large point I'm making is I think I understand it's a designated event. A lot of these guys aren't going to make the cut, but I think there's at least 5 or 6 guys here that I would be willing to speculate on. And I think Hubbard, Spawn, Dylan Wu, Carson Young, those are probably my favorite among them.
I like Hubbard, certainly. I like Dylan Wu. I think Chez is interesting. The one that you didn't mention that I have like one little eye on would be Nick Hardy, who I don't know, man. He hasn't been great, but he played well at the U.S. Open last week, and he had a good finish here. I think it was last year, right? Yeah, he finished 8th here last year. We're starting to see him just be like that one, like gain 3 strokes ball striking over the course of a tournament, like that guy, and be okay everywhere else. He won the Zurich, which was honestly quite fluky with him and Davis Riley, but
yeah,
I kind of like what we're seeing here. I was able to watch him play a little bit last week and thought he was hitting it well, and he's got the good vibes around this place. So that would be the only other one that I mentioned, but you're right. I think there are a lot of viable ways to build creatively because you can get access to a lot of guys down here.
Yeah, I'll mention Streelman as well. There's a lot of guys down here, frankly.
All right. Well, listen, let's see if we can find some more narratives in the streets and see if we can put together some lineups in that way. This is the Strokes Gained narrative portion of the show. Troy, what do we got here, bud? Okay, let's see. We've got Oracle at Tee to Green says, in honor of the greatest time traveler movie series ever made, he is offering up this lineup. Matt, back to the Kuchar. Boom.
Nice.
Adam, great Scott Marty. Pretty decent. Seamus, 1.2 gigawatts of power needed for time travel. Okay. Ben Martin McFly. That's pretty creative.
Mm-hmm.
Doc Emmett Brown Redmond, and Jason, you made a time machine out of a DeLorean. Pretty creative.
Oracle, good job.
What movie was he referencing?
You're joking, right?
Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
Back to the Future. I'm just messing with Kyle says, for the Travelers Championship, some countries you might travel to. Okay, that's an interesting take on this. Let's see what we've got here. Mexico, Homa. Perfect. Cameroon, Young. Eric, Colombia. That one's easy. Emiliano Hungrilo. Japan Drew Landry. And Denmark Hubbard. Very straightforward, very good. The Model Maniac has gone with, as you can imagine. See, these are all like traveling, but it taken in different ways.
Yes.
So Model Maniac says a fleet of Tommies. Harry Hall's Nimbus 2000. That's from Harry Potter. Brandon WooFO. Could you imagine traveling in a UFO? That'd be pretty good. Oh, Aaron Rideshare.
That's excellent.
This one, I like. This is my favorite. Jimmy Walker.
Hey, he's live for this tournament too.
Just already done. And then Tom, of course, the tank engine, Kim. 6 different ways to travel. Well done. What else we got, Troy?
And if you're watching us on YouTube, he had some Photoshop. By the way, Rick, real quick, we had so many submissions this week, maybe our most ever for whatever reason. So some of you didn't sort of make the cut. These are the last 2 that we're going to go over now. But keep sending them in. We'll get them up there next week.
If you want to see the rest of them, you can click on that hashtag StrokesGained at its hashtag SG narrative, and you can read through them. So Ryan at Fantasy Bunker has this. He says British statesman Oliver Cromwell founded Cromwell, Connecticut. That's true. Don't let people tell you this is in Hartford. This is in Cromwell. So here are a few, fictional Brits with greater fame than Oliver Cromwell. Well, let's start with the very famous Seamus Austin Powers. J.B. Sherlock Holmes. Wow. That would be pretty good. You know, that's actually interesting because there was kind of a mystery about JB playing in that. He played in that Money Calcutta under John Bradley or whatever as a 7th handicap a couple weeks ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. A little mystery that Sherlock Holmes could have been trying to solve. Willy Wonka Gordon. Tarzander Shoffley. C.T. Peter Pan, and James Bond. James Bond. Good job, Ryan. Oh, he's done it again. John Markowski says, Travelers, I see a lot of them in every NBA game, and he has hit us with some other basketball violations. For example, Sia, Eric Cole tending.
Boom.
Kramer, shot cock violation. Ricky, flagrant fouler. That's good.
Yeah.
Matt charging. Ryan palming. Classic. They never call that anymore. And
they don't.
A Zach Court violation, Blair.
It's very good.
Very good.
They really don't call palming anymore. If you zero in, if you like start to watch an NBA game and you like zero in on like how everybody just brings up the ball and palms it, you can't get your mind off of it. Like you have to almost turn it off because it's like, wait, this is ridiculous. Like the hand is under the ball and now it's over the ball. Like, what are we even doing here?
It has to be, there has to be, maybe I can go to like Basketball Reference and find out the last time, like how often palming has been called in like past season.
It's
like,
got to be so blatant for them.
Yeah. Like it has to be almost an accident. And then like so obvious that the ref accidentally blows his whistle. All right. Very good. Very good, gents. All right. We are back at it again tomorrow. That's Tuesday for the Mega Preview Pod. The fan selection for the one and done, that's in the description below. You can get your vote in and we will reveal said selection on Tuesday. Sia, much appreciated, my friend. We'll do it all again next week.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the rest of the week to listen to the rest of the shows. Let's go.
All right. At Sia Nejad on Twitter. You can find me at Rick Run Good, and it's producer Troy who does all the hard work behind the scenes. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.